This is a pilot episode for a possible series of an Arc Raiders podcast where we discuss Arc Raiders as well as other extraction shooter related topics. If you've clicked on this, you obviously have some level of interest. Be part of the conversation and the building process by leaving feedback down in the comments. It could be about anything, responses to some of our discussions, or even better, feedback on the setup itself. How long it should be, what topics we should cover, how often we should have them, is it worth it to do it live with chat participation, etc. Feel free to leave us running in the background to listen to while you do whatever you want. Enjoy.
I'm Boxes. I'll be your host today. I'm joined by two potential Arc-Aholics, the first of which is Gecko from the YouTube channel The Gecko Frontier. Gecko, can you tell listeners if you think the Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is actually Tom Cruise's last Mission Impossible?
I've thought every Mission Impossible was his last movie, so I mean, yes, I guess then, by that train of thought.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Our other co-host is a man called Luve from the YouTube channel It's Luve. Gecko, Luve foolishly told me yesterday that he's a light main in the finals. Luve, can you explain such a crippling personality defect and if you're worthy of love?
Simply get ratioed. I'm just built different.
Okay. All right. Gecko, you play the finals, right? You've played a little bit?
I've played a little bit here and there. I'm actually a heavy main, but then again, I don't play anymore.
I'm also a heavy main, so me and you understand why Luve is not, he's sketch. He's sketch right now.
It's understandable if you can't aim. Cool. That's why they made the heavy.
Okay.
Yes, he understands. He understands completely. I can't aim.
Things are not off to
I
a
love
good
my
start
sledgehammer boys. Don't get me wrong.
RPG for life.
First, I want to ask both of you, and we'll start with Gecko. What got you into the extraction genre? Where did it begin, and what extraction games have you sunk time into?
My journey was probably going to be reminiscent of a lot of people's journey coming soon for the Arc Raider game. I originally did not care for the extraction shooter formula of like losing your gear. I saw Hunt Showdown, I saw Tarkov, and I'm like, yeah, nah, man, that's just too heavy for me, man. I'm not interested. And then the Cycle Frontier came out, and it was free, and also me and my son got included into one of their early closed betas. So I'm like, you know what, F it, let's go ahead and try it. And well, the rest is history from there, man. I dug into it. I loved it. Now it's to the point where I just cannot, express how happy I am when I see a game going. I have the exact opposite reaction. I don't see, oh my God, so many extractions. Like, oh, there's not enough. There's really not enough.
I love it.
I love.
Agreed.
I love the tension that it builds. As an older gamer, I don't particularly care for the 60 kill match dopamine hit. I'm like, if you give me two solid firefights where I'm literally just hearing my heart in my ears, boom, I'm done. I'm good.
I'm with you 100% on that. But let me ask you this: what was it about the Cycle Frontier that clicked for you that the other ones didn't?
Well, I did mention that it was free, so that's a big starting point there.
Okay.
There's no investment at that point. So I'm very keen about knowing what games I like and what games I don't. And so if it's a game that I already have the feeling that I'm not going to spend more than 30 hours on, I'm not going to spend the money on it, period, full stop. But the Cycle Frontier, to me, I felt like was a middle ground. I've always liked sci-fi, so the sci-fi setting already pulled me in. But the time to kill, that it wasn't Tarkov, that it wasn't like, oh, I can instantly just get one shot at it out of nowhere, was a big factor. The fact that it was, again, sci-fi, so you had an excuse to have friendly indicators, which is a big thing for me. I don't like games that don't have friendly indicators. And, I started playing that, and then that opened the door for me, playing Hunt, and then me playing, ABI, and then all these other extraction games that, I just kind of dip my toes into, looking for the next thing that's going to get me.
Let me ask you, before we move on to Luve, how much time did you put into what I think we all agree is the king of the genre, which is Escape from Tarkov? How much time have you put into that game?
Zero.
Interesting.
Damn, interesting.
Explain this.
I don't care for the game. And the reason why is that it's one of those like respect your elders type situations where like I understand without Tarkov the genre wouldn't exist, but I think, and this is me, it's gonna be my hot take, the only reason Tarkov has existed for so long because it's had no competition for so long.
Agreed.
Okay, interesting. I like that. All right,
Luve. Here's
go ahead.
Just two bullet points when we get to Luve here. 2 bullet points. The reason being is it has so many design decisions that work for its community that would never work outside of it. and I would never want Tarkov to change to suit the outer community because it clearly has a niche community that is very passionate. So I would never want it to change. But
give me an example of that. Give me an example.
Well, for starters, no friendly indicators is just a strict no-no when it comes to games where
Okay.
you lose your stuff, especially when you're getting one tapped. That's for one.
So you're afraid of shooting
That's
your
funny.
your teammate.
Well, for sure, but it's like that's a natural thing. I've played military sim shooters like in PvP, squad, armor, things like that, right? That's an expected thing, but everyone has uniforms for starters, and secondly, you don't lose potentially weeks and months of progress when that happens.
How do you feel about an in-between, kind of like we saw with the Gray Zone Warfare update with the armbands, where you kind of have a little indicator, but it's not like an overhead heads up?
I think that's a step in the right direction. I feel like you can find innovative ways to do that without being without also holding someone's hand and also kind of being respectful of people's time, because it's not their J job to like learn how to do every single thing about the game. And so my best example would be a game like Level 0 Extraction, where you straight up got their name over their head if you looked at them. Like if you just like zoomed in on them or you focused on them, you get it.
Yeah.
But like you can easily twitch and just start shooting them before that pops up. You can easily do that if you're not paying attention.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. And then what was your second bullet point?
Oh, it was the zero. It was wipes. That's what it was. It was wipes. I know that's a common thing in extraction shooters, but I think that only exists because developers saw Tarkov and followed Tarkov. That's just a no-go for people. It's like, hey, you get to play in this game, and then you can only play it during a peak time of enjoyment during every 3 months or 6 months or whatever the heck it is, and then you can go, all right, cool. If you come back at that time, you get to play. That's already a no-no. And then secondly, I get to make all this progress and you get it wiped for no reason other than you can't fix a problem with your game. For most players outside of the extraction genre, outside of survival genre, that's just a straight up no-go.
Luve, what's your response to that?
I'm excited to talk about this stuff because while I think you have valid points and I might not agree with them, I have points in the other direction for the 2 points of I personally don't like friendly indicators of teammates, and I personally love server wipes. But I don't think you're wrong. I think they have a place in certain games, and I don't want to say all games should have friendly indicators or all games shouldn't have them and all games should have wipes. I just think it's cool that we have separate opinions on a genre that we both love.
Agreed. Actually, here's the thing. I actually like wipes, but I understand it's a no-go for the majority of players. So if you're going to try to appeal to a game like Arc Raiders is trying to appeal to the average gamer, you have to find a way around it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the points to bring up later, but I got some points against that.
No, that'll be fun because I feel like that's a huge topic within with this genre and the discussion around it. Luve, let's go with same question for you. How did you kind of first get into the genre? You're pre-extraction shooter genre, and then you were post. What was that defining moment for you?
Yeah, so little back history in gaming. I played a little bit of semi-professional Call of Duty when I was in high school. I was the arena shooter, the twitchy sniper, intervention, Modern Warfare 2 days. That was my bread and butter. I fell out of being in those arenas. It was just too quick, too fast. The dopamine got old quickly. And when I first built my PC and moved from Xbox 360, I found the DayZ mod for Arma, and then eventually the DayZ standalone. So a lot like the opposite of Gecko's experience. I love that slow burn. I love walking for an hour, meeting up with my friend, grabbing gear, finding a Mosin. I don't got the right ammo for it yet. Then once you got all your stuff, the ghillie suit made, sitting on the side of a hill and just waiting to see someone come by in front of you. Once I played about 1,000 hours of that, H1Z1 came out. I'm sure you guys all remember that. And I found myself way more in the survival side of it than in the battle royale side of it. Of course, we all got into Call of Duty. We all got into everything. That's when my buddy got super into Tarkov. And I really didn't like the extraction shooter because it felt too fast for me. I didn't like the Tarkov timed arenas at that time. I loved the idea of sitting, waiting, kind of that slower, what got me into it. But then recently, in only the past year or so, I've sunk my teeth pretty deep into Tarkov. Gray Zone Warfare kind of leans for me towards the DayZ side, which I appreciate it a little bit more with a persistent live server. And unfortunately, I did not get into the Marathon or Arc Raiders. beta, but I've been consuming all the information my brain and eyes can maintain with all of that stuff, and kind of just excited to have something that is a little more accessible than Tarkov, because I feel like a lot like MMORPGs, which I also come from, like World of Warcraft, I feel like I came in a little too late to Tarkov. It's really fun to be in that iterative people figuring out the game together. So I would say I'm kind of dipping my toes in. I'd say I'm like knee height into the genre right now.
Valid. We all start somewhere, for sure. Let me ask you this. Now, you say like I'm surprised you say you were resistant to Tarkov, because of all the extraction shooters that I see, it does seem like kind of the slowest pacing of all of them. I guess you just didn't like the time limit that was put upon you.
Yeah, and I think it's good to look at Tarkov in the scope of when I was looking at it, because right now you have so many extraction shooters. You have not Frontier anymore, but you have Hunt Showdown. You have all these new extraction shooters coming out. But when I was getting into it, you're comparing that to Call of Duty, Arma, more military sim stuff. And for me, Call of Duty felt way too fast, jumping in the washing machine, I like to call it, where you hop on shipment, turn your brain off for a little bit. But I loved in DayZ, whenever I logged into DayZ, every time felt like a story. It's like everything had a journey with it. And the half an hour cutoff in Tarkov, I think it was my brain just not accepting that I had to keep moving. Of course, I've come to love that now, that time where it kind of bases you around getting out and kind of makes the choke points of the map. But at the time, it didn't click right with me in a military sim to slow things down. But now I understand it is kind of the slower of that, which is kind of a funny juxtaposition of how I originally viewed it.
No, very valid, very valid.
I think you would have enjoyed the Cycle Frontier for that reason, because it's persistent service. You leave when you want to leave.
It's funny. I have never heard about it until about last week, and I'm sad I missed that.
Yeah, it had its flaws and whatnot, but that's one of the features that I think made it the most unique of all the extraction shooters, because it had zero timer. So you come in at a certain point, and they have certain mechanics that going to force you to want to get out, but like you didn't have to. And so you could literally, I've had drops. The longest drop I had in that game, I think it was about 70 minutes. Like it was just basically wow. And that's excessive, mind you, but it was just like at the time, again, still really new. I think everyone kind of goes through that phase where they're really into extraction shooters. They play like a rat, and they're kind of really slow and methodical, and they're like, they don't want to lose anything, even though it's like just, pixels at the end of the day. So I was still kind of going through that phase. And so,
it's funny too, because I used to play a sniper a lot with the ghillie suits, and kind of side tangent, I've gotten really into firearms myself and learning CQB in real life. And so I've kind of found myself playing a little faster in games now that I'm learning those CQB techniques in real life.
Yeah, that happens.
Dude, that's what I wouldn't say it happened to me. I don't do any of that stuff, but that's an interesting perspective for sure. Let's see here. I do want to ask you guys this. So who was it? I think the developer of the Cycle Frontier said the reason why we're closing up shop is because cheaters, right?
Now, let's not get into the cycle, because I will be here all day.
You'll be okay. That's near and dear to your heart. Again, this is an Arc Raiders focused podcast.
Specifically on why they shut down, because I already made a whole video on that one.
Okay, I gotcha. I'll just answer the question that I asked real quickly. So you guys don't know this, but I'm actually 9 years old. My favorite game of all time is Fortnite.
Roblox?
No, that used to be my favorite game of all time. But so from 2017 to about 2024, I was like maining Fortnite the whole time. They've eventually, over the years, they kind of pushed me out because I play like ambush ratty style, and it seems like the developers don't like that. People like me doing that to, other 9-year-olds. But the reason why I got into extraction is because when you're reading about battle royale in Fortnite, you're seeing a lot of comments like, oh, the extraction genre is the next evolution of battle royale, and I didn't understand it. I'm like, how is getting out with a weapon and items and maybe some body armor, how can that give you the same experience of being in the top 3 of a battle royale, like a final 3? So I heard it so much I got sick of it, and I'm like, let me download Vigor, which is a really janky, not very popular extraction shooter, and within the first match it like clicked for me, right? So I love the aspect. I'm coming from the opposite side of Luve, where I love the fact that I didn't have this storm pushing me. I just had a broad timer, but it felt like it gave me more freedom. And I only played that game for about 30, 40 hours before I realized, like, okay, I understand how the progression system work here. I'm gonna wait for like the the proper introduction to the genre, which I think that's where we're kind of headed towards with Arc Raiders and then potentially Marathon as well. So that's kind of how I started. So, Luve, if you're knee deep in the genre, I might be ankle deep in the genre, and I think Gecko might be maybe more waist deep or shoulder deep. If we're gonna go with that.
Yeah, good spread.
Yeah, for sure. Here's where we're going now. I guess I'll hit this both of you right now. Gecko, a lot of comments online are saying the following quote: "The extraction genre is inherently niche." Do you agree with that comment? Because you read it all the time online.
Absolutely. I think
It's true.
You do.
I think it's absolutely true. Because here's the thing: the question isn't whether or not it's niche, because it is. It's just that's not debatable. And I'll get into why for just a second. The real question that Arc Raiders has to answer is that can they make it in a way that makes it significantly more appealing than it has been, right? That's really the question they got to answer. And if they
Right.
can, how big is that market potentially? That's really what it comes down to. Now, the reason why I don't think it's debatable and whether or not it's niche, like if you look at the average gamer, they play an hour a day, maybe if they're lucky. So you're asking a person, and this comes into wipes as well. You're asking a person who barely has an hour a day to play at around or on average, whatever, right? To play a game that is very likely, there's a very real chance that they'll go negative in the time it takes for them to start playing and to the time they're done. Not that they've made zero progress, they can go negative. That already is a hard sell. All right, that's just already a hard sell. People want to jump on and they want to play and they want to have some progression, or at the very least go zero. Right? No. This one is straight up telling you might end up in a significantly worse situation than when you started. Right? That's a real possibility. We've all had those hour-long sessions where we just start spiraling like, damn, man,
Lost everything.
Basically, lost half your stash in like one day or over the course of a week or whatever, right? So you're asking a person to sign up for that, for starters. And then bringing it back to the wipes thing is like, okay, you have that, and then you might inadvertently get reset every 3 months to no fault of your own as well. That's a really hard sell.
Luve, what do you think about that?
So I have a couple comments on what Gecko said, but I have a first thing where I think when you look at the nicheness of the extraction shooter, you run into a balance problem. Not balance in like balancing the stuff, but you run into a balance of how intricate are the systems and how interesting is the game. I think if you look at the Battle Royale during the COVID times, we got Fortnite, we had PUBG before that, we had Warzone. I think the reason those games were so popular is because the lack of thought and hurdle to get into it. You could go to your coworker who had a PlayStation and be like, buddy, download Warzone, we're hopping in tonight. He got a question, shut up, don't worry, hop out of plane, shoot a guy coming at you. There's no thought process. It's very easy to understand the loop of that. Same thing when it comes to something like Counter-Strike or something where it's just easily understandable. The problem is that when you come to something like Warzone, it's wide as a lake, deep as a puddle. When Tarkov, I think, is quite the opposite of that. I'm going to use Tarkov as an example because it is, we could say, the most popular extraction shooter right now. When you get into that game, it's almost like I need to read an encyclopedia. Maybe that's just myself because I love learning things, but it almost can feel hard to get in there and understand what to do. If you hadn't played extraction shooters, to go to the stores to pick up the quests is not, I think, something that's taught very easily or something that's intrinsic to learn. And so I think when you start making things too easy and boxes just popping up to do stuff, I think you take away the core of what makes an extraction shooter fun is learning all the intricacies. So I think by that nature itself, you'll never see it reach Battle Royale popularity. And if you do see it reach Battle Royale popularity, it will not be a very intricate style system of a game.
They'll smooth off the rough edges, you're saying.
Exactly. And I think that's what people love about the extraction shooters is finding the different ammo that works with a certain gun, finding, this red dot and that recoil. I think once you homogenize all of that into like a Call of Duty experience, you kind of lose the essence of what has made this genre so interesting to sink your teeth into.
Just a quick little pushback question on that one. do you think that if Tarkov were made today, right? Like a lot of one of the biggest complaints that people have inadvertently towards Tarkov is that you feel like you have to constantly go through like a third party website and this other place and that other place to find the basic information that rightfully should be available to you in the game. If we did that for Tarkov, for example, if Tarkov was then given these new systems to where they don't have to go to these third parties places, they were actually given the information they need in order to make those kind of decisions. Wouldn't that make the game? It wouldn't change the game, but wouldn't it make it significantly more appealing?
I would like to refer to a Hideo Kojima quote, which, given the opportunities, players will optimize the fun out of every single video game.
For sure.
And
yeah.
I like to think that, yes, sometimes I'm struggling in Tarkov to find the water bottle from Captain Smith on Woods. I shouldn't know where that is. I can Google it and find it's in this random bush somewhere. But if I loaded in and there was an arrow pointed at it with a little like checkered box that I followed on the ground to get there, and I hate to just say it's more complicated than that, but I think a nuanced approach of what you're saying is yes. I think it's somewhere in between giving you everything and not at all holding your hand.
Oh, 100%. And I wouldn't want to have like something telling me in the game, but at the very least, I could look at a gun and be like, well, which one of these bullets does what and this, that, and the other. And so being able to tell me,
I completely agree with.
Right. And so it's more of just having the information available rather than just showing you how to use it. And I think that's the biggest, I think that's the biggest difference is that when people oftentimes Tarkov players think of, like systems that improve the game genre to make it more accessible, they immediately think dumbing down. It's like, no. It's called streamlining, right? And
it's called new player experience.
Yeah, it's called new player experience. It's called new player retention, right? And it doesn't actually change how you play the game, right? It just makes it easier to get started. And that's really the important thing, because if it's easy to get started, then more people can access it, right? And if that's not the goal, that's not the goal. That's fine, right?
Yeah. Some games aren't meant to be for everyone. If you look at Elden Ring or Dark Souls, great selling games, not for everyone.
Right. And I think there is a middle ground to that. And I usually try to push back when people say things like, oh, if you make it accessible, you take away what makes extraction shooters special. Like, no. It's just how you do it is really the key there. And I think Arc Raiders found a really, really great formula to like do all of that.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to take issue with that in the sense that like, well, it's the time to kill is too high. It's third person. It's this, that, and the other. Or there's not all these different kind of ammo. That's fine, right? You could say it is easier. Yes, it is in fact easier, but that's also what makes it, more accessible without taking the edge, which is you lose your shit.
Yeah, and I think walking the line of informing the player without holding their hand, because I do think you can go overboard also. I do think you can strip out some of that stuff and streamline a game too much to where you take away the intricacies of it.
100%.
Yeah. But and then that same thing, I almost have to push back against your server wipes. And I actually think they're a good thing for casual people getting into the game if we want it to be more a casual friendly game. And the reason that is because I do not think server wipes affect casual players as much as they affect hard entrenched players. One of my good buddies is like a Tarkov stan. It's his main game. He could tell you any little fact about it. Full bunker. That's the game he plays, and that's the game he's kind of taking me under the wing about it. And I have two problems with playing with someone who gets you into a game like that. The first one is when you go into your first wipe and buddy drops you an end game, just full kit that isn't earned. It might feel great in that moment, but I really do feel like the journey of extraction shooters is what makes the game incredible, not the destination.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, I don't think at all it's fair. Let's say you, Gecko, went to try your first hour of Tarkov, and you load into a game with me and my buddy with no wipes, and we got full level 5 armor, fully auto, and you just get one tap without understanding you just lost that fight because we've had hours on there. I think it can bring more people in to level the playing field of the sweats and the casuals on a pure gear level, is my opinion on why it can actually be better for the casual player. It can harm the extended player who feel like they work for stuff. But I feel like people have already sunk the hours into it, already love that game, and I do not think wipes really are affecting them. But I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Oh, sure. I think the argumentation for wipes is talking past the sale in a lot of cases. I'm going to say something heretical to especially Tarkov players is that I shouldn't be in your lobbies if that's the case.
Matchmaking issue,
Yes.
you're saying?
Yeah, it's a matchmaking issue, right? I know Tarkov players. There should be no matchmaking because that's a knee-jerk reaction to the hyperbolic SBMM that people have an aversion to.
Call of Duty machine, yeah.
Right, the Call of Duty machine, right? It's like, okay, it's just plain and simple. New players should not be in the same lobbies as players who have 100 hours or more. That's common sense, right? People will say duh, right? But they'll say duh, but then they'll be, well, there should be no matchmaker. That's inherently what you're asking for. And so when I understand the idea of the earned prospect and the jumping in when everything's, you're talking about gear saturation, which is the main issue of extraction shooters, right? That's the inherent problem that is created with the gameplay loop. Tarkov has had 8 years to solve it. They don't want to solve it. It's just, it's, to me, some games need wipes, some games don't. The vast majority of them don't. You just lack the imagination.
If you successfully build an item sink, a resource sink, you can take those items out of the game with a tax or something. No, I agree. Right. That's honestly a valid point of matchmaking. I honestly hadn't thought about that angle.
Right, and so it's one of those things, because it's usually heretical to say that for anyone who wants to, say, Tarkov is a good game, and so it's kind of like, those things shouldn't be an issue. And then the same thing from people say, well, a one man should be able to take on a 5-man if he plays well. He shouldn't be in the same lobby as them. Period. Full stop. And so it's the thing about gear saturation is that you need a way of getting gear out at a faster rate than you put gear in, which is really hard because, well, the nature of the beast is that you create gear and you get gear and you go in, and then more times than not, you find gear and you pull it out and you secure it. And so you have to find a way to solve that problem over time. And I've seen a couple of solutions to this. One of them is typically just a higher tax and burn rate of equipment, whatever it is. That typically doesn't harm people who are at the higher end of the spectrum of this game because they can readily supply themselves. It just basically ends up being a lower level tax on the individuals who have a hard time doing it. So that's not really a solution for everybody, really.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I would also point back to sometimes it feels bad. Like I watched your Gray Zone video about the durability of weapons, and having gotten into weapons myself, if I go and shoot 1,000 rounds downrange, my red dot doesn't break. And so you need to find a common ground of how those things feel good to the player also.
Right. That's also the realism trap, though, unfortunately. I think I made a video on that, is that when you're tied, that's one of the reasons I like sci-fi games, is that you're not tied to a realism trap.
100%. So your red dot could run out of nuclear energy after a certain amount of time. You can kind of play with that stuff.
Yeah, whatever. Any number of things you can make up because if it's sci-fi and you only have to worry about 3 basic questions, right? Is that within the IP, within the structure that you've put together for the technology and whatnot, does it make sense? Is it fun? Is it balanced? That's it. You don't have to worry about nothing else, which gives you a tremendous amount of freedom for a game.
100%.
Guys, can I respond to the last 10 minutes of the conversation from the left field?
No.
All right.
You're kidding.
I shouldn't ask you guys questions. So picture what video games were in the 70s and 80s. They were largely single player, right? And they were largely like you play this thing for 2 minutes to 5 minutes, these short loops over and over again. And then sometime in the 90s, everything shifted to these long form, like more RPGs, more this is a 20-hour game, this is a 40-hour game, this is a 100-hour game, right? And if you look at what single player has done since they went from these short loops games to these like long loop games, we'll call it, they never went back to the short loop, right? The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I feel like multiplayer has stayed in this short loop kind of mindset where it's like, all right, we're playing the finals for 15 minutes or Call of Duty for 15 minutes, or do you know what I mean? And I feel like one of the things that makes the extraction genre so interesting is like it's actually like a big RPG, right? It's like this long form. You're building your character over a couple of months. Do you guys see what I'm trying to put forth there?
I think 100%, because I think the reason I love extraction shooters is because I come from the MMORPG world. Yeah. I play World of Warcraft, I play RuneScape, and I love that. And I may have lost the sword I got yesterday, but you can't take away my experience in RuneScape.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's kind of why I love extraction shooters more than Call of Duty. I can play Call of Duty for 6 hours one day, and the next day I can log in and I haven't heard anything. I could win 3 battle royales the day before, and short of like maybe a camo or a new
Right.
sticker, I do love that. But sorry for interrupting you there, Gecko.
No, that was perfect.
No,
That was
you're
perfect.
good. That's perfect. I'm actually going to push back a little bit. I don't necessarily agree with your assessment or your characterization.
Hit me with why.
And so you're looking at, because I think if you're looking at the bigger games, like in terms of like RPGs and adventure games and whatnot, right? Yeah, sure, but there's also other types of games that have the short loop in them. You're looking at your roguelites, your tower defenses, and things of that nature. Like you can create really good games,
Racing games.
that have short loops in them that are, the single player games, and do just fine. Or the co-op games, looking at Helldivers 2, great example, right? Now they do have mechanisms to prolong that experience. You're leveling up your character, you have more access to more stratagems, things of that nature, but the actual loop itself is still pretty short.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I guess I see, like, let's take Zelda, for example, the single player Zelda from Nintendo. Really, all games, if you boil them down, are these little, like, your little character Link is gonna go to a new screen and he's gonna sword fight these AI, and then he's gonna go to the next screen, he's gonna sword fight slightly different AI. If you think about it, single player games are really short loops grafted onto each other to serve a broad, like a long narrative, right? Do you kind of see what I'm saying?
Well, sort of. That was kind of my point exactly. Is that like these are small loops that serve the bigger narrative, and I think the way extraction shooters go, to hop on what Luve said, I agree. Is that I think that's why extraction shooters are the next evolution of BRs. Back to that original point, is that they extend the story beyond the drop you just had, right? So they go from the next one to next one, the next one. So winning isn't necessarily just the gunfight; it's acquiring the wealth in your stash. And
progression isn't just that one game,
right? Oh no, I actually think all three of us are on the same page there. Then, I guess the reason why I bring up that analogy is because I think of, like, a lot of multiplayer games they almost felt like sports games in the fact that, like, all right, you're just doing this little session, you're trying to beat the other team, and then you're just doing that session over and over with very limited long form progression, right?
Right.
And I feel like what this is doing is it's creating an RPG in the PvP form. And so when you guys bring up the fact that, like, high level players versus low level players, they shouldn't be in the same lobby, I totally reject that notion, because I think of, like, movies like, for example, Lord of the Rings. The movie starts with the Fellowship, the 4 little hobbits are going off, and then they're getting chased by the ring wraiths, right? What that narrative shows you is, like, ring wraiths are super powerful. The hobbits are very underpowered characters, and the dynamic between them is still interesting, to where, like, it's a PvP type environment, but it's in this broad, long form story. So when you say, like, I don't like how you can get one-shotted by high level Escape from Tarkov players, I agree that that's like a poor player experience. But I think there needs to be a way for high level, super experienced players to have a pleasant, an interesting interaction with, like, new players in a way that's just not like, I just one-shotted you from, like, your game just ended.
Oh, I agree. Don't mistake my phrase there. I'll try to flesh that out a little bit. Is that the new player experience needs to be center to the new player experience, right? Not just being another chum to throw into the bucket there.
Oh yeah, chum is bad. Chum is bad.
Right?
We agree.
Right, and so, like, at a certain point, like, let's say you're not necessarily the best player, but you've been playing the game for at least, like, I don't know, 20, 30 hours. You're no longer a new player anymore, right? We can throw you in the deep end now. So whether or not it's you, whether you're good or not, now it's a skill issue, right? And that's perfectly okay. It's like, hey, you're in with the sharks now, but, like, you got to learn how to swim now. Like, now's the time.
Also, in a fantasy book, Frodo's going to come through and win, but my buddy who has 1,000 hours in Tarkov is going to drop you every single fucking raid.
Right.
And here's the funny thing about that, right? Is that that kind of brings me back to, like, gear disparity and, like, power dynamics and whatnot. And so it's kind of like when people lament a piece of gear that is expensive and really hard to get is stronger than the very, very, very cheap, very easy to get, practically free gear. I go, then what would be the point of me acquiring it then?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes people equate the gear to the win. Oftentimes, I think the second most negative thing people said about the Cycle Frontier was the gear disparity. Now, here's the thing. Gear disparity in that game was ridiculously thin, like ridiculously thin. It was to the point where it was practically just non-existent, right? And then I have the numbers in terms of the recordings and everything like that to back that up. And so, but if they thought whenever the time they get killed was someone who had 2 or 3 tiers higher gear than them, they immediately thought, well, that person killed me because they had better gear. No, they killed you because they have 1,000 hours more than you. That's why they killed you.
Yeah, everything that led up to win that gunfight.
Pretty much. And it's one of those things where, like, if a person is that confident and that skilled to wear that gear on a regular basis, chances are they were going to beat you no matter what gear they had on them.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and to me, that experience brought me to believe that a feature that is super important for an extraction shooter to have is a shooting range. Because that lets players completely and utterly transparently see what their weapons can and cannot do. And so they'll know for a fact, I can kill this person with this armor, with this weapon, with this many shots. They know for a fact it can be done. So when they don't do it, they know it ain't because, you know, this person has some unstoppable gear. They know it because they got outplayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess when I look at this genre, I don't like it where it's just like different. It's just different power levels of guns or different power levels of DPS. I kind of always like grafted onto like the Lord of the Rings or the Star Wars or like these grand narrative movies or TV shows, to where it's like these lower powered characters have avenues to escape or best these higher level players, right? And it's not with like, oh, they just found a red lightsaber and they can beat the ring race now. I feel like the genre needs to grow in an avenue where you're giving the Frodo type characters faster foot speed or things of that nature, right?
Right. And there needs to be a trade-off to that. I think I put that in my feedback regarding the one issue that I think that isn't just superficial about the Arc Raiders that I would want to see changed would be the balancing of armor. And the armor in that game is unbalanced in a way, not necessarily because heavy armor is distinguishably like this head above shoulders better than medium and better than light. It's more of the it's set up that way economically speaking because one is like 30 times more expensive than the last.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't have to be, and you can give reasons to run all three, and therefore giving people options to play different ways. And I think also just in terms of weapon, dynamics, like weapons need to have a diminishing return when it comes to their power skills, because that way people who have lower level weapons are still dangerous to people who have high level armor, right? And so and that is the case. That is the absolute case. Anyone who tells you otherwise was just a skill issue. Sorry.
No, and I also do have a problem with I'm gonna say buffing newer or less experienced players, because let's say I'm brand new to Arc Raiders and I get a movement buff because people in my lobbies are a higher level. That feels bad that if I win those gunfights and I clear people out, I'm now go slower. So it's interesting to see that when you're giving something to someone, you're also taking something away from someone who might have put more hours into the game and maybe earned something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's the skill tree that does that as well, in terms of like giving you more stamina and, other factors. So I like the skill tree a lot in Arc Raiders that does that. You could say that, a person who has X number of levels is going to inherently have a better, advantage over the other person. Yeah, but they have to utilize it. They have to be able to wield it.
Yeah. It should be a minuscule advantage that you can optimize in certain ways, but it shouldn't be a full God mode super jump sprint situation.
For sure. And I think playing the game, I can tell you, it's one of those things where if you're brand new and you're just inherently skillful at these kind of games, and the person who's played like 50 hours in the game has all these level ups and all this equipment, right? If they're not inherently as skillful at these kind of games, it's gonna show. Like your base skill level is going to show.
Interesting.
Yeah. Guys, it's been 40 minutes since we started this podcast. We need to jump into the main topic, okay?
I'm here for it.
Okay.
The main topic is, we're supposedly Arc-Aholics, right? I want to ask both of you. We'll start with Gecko. Gecko, where were you on Arc Raiders a month ago? Where are you at today? I feel like the last month has been like the media has totally been focused on these two big games, Arc Raiders and Marathon. Can you just tell us, where you were 30 days ago, where you are today on them?
I mean, I'm in the same place I was 2 years ago. I love the game. Like it's just one of those things where when I first played it in 2023, I immediately knew the bones were there. I
Really?
immediately knew
Really?
I immediately knew. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be it. Now it could have been because I was already on the tail end of the Cycle Frontier shutting down and I needed like my fix. But in seeing it now, like every time I've seen it, I've been thoroughly impressed. And with the new version of it, the terms of the playtest that we had, like it's amazing, right? I get aside from probably the armor thing, but that's really just a tiny thing in the grand scheme of things. But it's a solid game, and I think because I'm seeing so many people of different backgrounds when it comes to their content covering the game and having all different types of experiences, not just like, oh man, I wiped the whole lobby, and you have other people going like, I just rode a Rocketeer into the wall, like, or some goofy proxy chat type stuff. It's just, you have all that in between. You have you have these different kind of experiences going viral, right? In these spaces. That tells me it has a wide appeal. It has a very, very, very wide appeal, which is really, really good for this genre. And I think it's going to go places.
I think I'm on board with you. Luve, what about you?
So I'm kind of the opposite. I'd heard about Arc Raiders, but if you had asked me 30 days ago what I thought about Arc Raiders, I would have been like, what? About a month ago is when I started to reconsume this media and relearn about this. I'm a huge fan of Embark. I have close to 500 hours in the finals. I love the
as a
level
light main.
customization.
As a light main.
Yeah, Emerald. Let's just call it out real quick.
Oh God, okay.
But
okay.
I love the studio. They're incredible. I think they're one of the studios that I can trust cares about the people that play their game, and that's just given me so much confidence in this going forward. I think, again, to reference my background, I work in marketing. I'm a graphic designer by trade. When I first saw Marathon, I was way more hyped on the pure visuals alone, because I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of getting that mid-2000s Call of Duty fatigue again. I do feel like a lot of the games we're getting are that gray, beige sort of stuff. And when I saw Marathon, I was so pumped.
Yeah. But
then when you started to see gameplay of both, and when you started to see the development of both and the companies behind them, it's incredible how much Bungie has fumbled the fucking bag. They had the biggest sprint going, and I feel like Arc Raiders coming up from under that is going to get way more media attention simply from the fumble of Marathon. And I think that's amazing, because I think Embark is going to ride this into the future and truly make an incredible product for a wide variety of people.
Yeah. They in video game discourse, there's a lot of like, oh, this upcoming game is going to be a Halo killer. It's going to be a Zelda killer. It's going to be
a World of Warcraft killer.
World of Warcraft killer. I feel like potentially there's actually a legit one coming into fruition, and there's a Marathon killer, and I feel like it's Arc Raiders.
I feel like it's Bungie.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point too. That's a good point too. But I just think, like, if you go to 2018 Bungie with, I think the studio size for Marathon is around 300 developers, and you say, hey, you're going to spend the next 6 years making an Escape from Tarkov, big budget, sci-fi extraction shooter. In my mind, I'm like, that is the most beautiful seed to start at. Now, I can't wait to see what it looks like. And then what they showed us over the last, a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, why did you make a Fisher-Price Escape from Tarkov? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that kind of leads into the gear fear also. Like, maybe another topic for another day, but I feel like an extraction shooter without gear fear doesn't work well. And I think Marathon, like you said, it's baby first extraction shooter. I don't think it's gonna work. It's gonna feel like a Call of Duty shipment lobby.
It's so weird to me that game is what ultimately they've been working on for that long. Gecko, what I mean, I know we're Arc-Aholics. This is an Arc Raiders podcast, but I feel like these two games are so intrinsically linked right now that I feel like we got to talk. Like, I do want to hear your perspective on Marathon, and what were you thinking going in, and what do you think right now?
I think that my initial reaction, I think I gave this opinion on one of the more recent videos, was that I honestly thought that, because here's the thing, I wasn't really a Destiny person, so I haven't really had an interaction with Bungie in any substantial way since like the Halo days. So I'm still thinking it from your dad's Bungie, aka my Bungie, perspective. And so it is definitely not that anymore, from everything I've been able to see. And so I was thinking, though, that Marathon coming out from Bungie, it was just going to absolutely just devour whoever it is was going to devour when it came out, right? In terms of the extraction shooter space. And so I was actually, as a person who's already kind of invested in Arc Raiders, I was really concerned. I was betting on Arc Raiders and potentially even Exoborn beating them to the market, beating Marathon to the market, right? And getting enough of a player base to sustain that loss so that way they can still stay alive, right? That was my thinking. Fast forward now, I'm just wondering, dear Lord, Marathon needs to delay at least a year minimum, because it's just, if it comes out now, because of the publicity, or because of the publicity, and because no game is released in a vacuum, because of Arc Raiders as well, is that it's not going to do well. And I actually want Marathon to do well. As someone who likes Arc Raiders, I want Marathon to do well as well, because if they make it into something workable, they do represent very different experiences for the extraction shooter space, right? So they can coexist quite easily. And the reason why I think, you said if it's baby's first extraction shooter, like maybe there's a lot of people who just simply don't want the gear fear as much as they think they do. And it could be like me, like I said, in terms of like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. It's really low level. It's Bungie. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. And then they learn to kind of live with that gear fear, even if it's at a small amount. They're like, hey, I kind of like this. Maybe I want a little bit more. And then boom, that's their gateway drug. And they come to Arc Raiders and they come to whoever, that goes from there.
Yeah. I will say, with regards to that particular statement with the gear fair and Marathon issue, do we know? I don't think we know, and I could be wrong. I don't think we know what their progression curve looked like for the alpha. Like, don't you think there's a chance they really condensed it just to kind of get the testing down? Like, hey, in these, this week-long alpha, we're going to try to get players from ground level to max level. And I feel like
I'm
maybe
sure
in the
they
full
did.
game.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they did.
But even with what they showed us, the loop looks very much like a 1 week loop and not a 1 month loop, is the way I would describe it. From the gameplay I watched, I could be off on that. I just feel like it meant to be a thing where you could get back up on your feet very quickly if you were to get wiped. And it seemed almost like, I could be wrong with this and it could be changed, it's coming out pretty soon. It seemed almost like infinite scav runs, if you're familiar with that concept.
Yeah.
And that, to me, sometimes I don't know if is the answer or not.
Yeah. I know, and tell me if you guys empathize with this statement. I know when I first saw that, I was so excited for that big Marathon event, like the hour-long debut gameplay reveal. Yeah. And I think they started off by showing Dr. Lupo. This is the one that sticks in my head, and I'm like, this repulses me. They show Dr. Lupo sprinting around. He's jumping. He's like boosting past the crate, and he shotguns a guy behind a crate. And I'm like, I don't see my particular playstyle in any of that hour-long game. It like, that's, I know I like the finals, but I'm like, that Marathon gameplay reveal looked like a slightly worse version in terms of moment-to-moment gameplay of the finals. Like, very fast-paced, very twitchy. And I feel like this genre, especially for me, the way I play games, it's like I play like I can sit in a bush for 10 minutes and talk to my partner, and then, we'll converse like that. And I don't feel like Marathon was interested in me at all in that regard. What do you guys think about that? We'll go with Gecko.
All right. I think you can have a mover shooter style game in the extraction shooter genre. It doesn't have to be, low time to kill, slow pace kind of game. You can make it work. I just don't think they did a very good job of it. Right. It's like,
they didn't go full force into it. They half stepped into it.
Right. And I think the interesting thing is that when Marathon first released its footage, and before I got a chance to play it and kind of really sink my teeth into it, I was thinking, okay, cool, Exoborn's DOA, like straight up, like they're kind of diving into the same pool. Now I'm like, even a game like Exoborn, which I don't hold in too high a regard, I think it has potential, but as of what I've seen from it so far, it's okay. But even Exoborn has the ability to just knock Marathon off its block, and it's kind of like, because they do it better, they do the movement, the dynamic thing better. And they also do the hero part better too, which is kind of like the one of the main issues people keep talking about in terms of like the hero shooter mechanics. Is like, we don't want that in an extraction shooter. We don't.
Right.
And so, just a quick thing, Luve, have you played Exoborn or have gotten a chance to look into Exoborn at all?
I've looked at it a little bit. I'm not gonna say I'm an expert. I haven't really played a bunch of these, but I kind of agree with what you were saying though, where they're kind of going up the same tree. And I do think there is a space in the extraction shooter to have a full movement beast. I do think someone could come out here and make a fast-paced, almost Titanfall-esque extraction shooter.
Someone tried.
Yeah. My problem is that Marathon is trying to hit every audience, and it's half going into everything, and it's kind of half falling flat on its face on everything.
Yeah, agreed. Just to reiterate as to why I asked that question is because Exoborn, it does the hero mechanics, but in a way that suits the extraction shooter genre. My biggest contention with hero mechanics is that it's a genre that relies on gear fear, tension, scarcity. It relies on those things.
The gear should be better than your abilities of the hero.
Right. And the issue is that the abilities of the hero, they're not limited. They don't get lost. They can't get looted. And they, by inherently, they cannot be mixed and matched because they're inherent into a kit. Whereas Exoborn, you have a frame, like your exo frame, that has its certain base stats, right? But then you have the abilities that you can attach to it. So these are essentially your hero abilities. But there are abilities like, grenade launchers, artillery strikes, shields, like things like that. But those do have their limits. They can be looted and they can be lost on death. And so they effectively do the hero mechanics, but in an extraction shooter way. So it's kind of like I point to that and go, cool. If you want to do some kind of hero mechanics, that's how you do it.
I don't know if you guys ever got to play Off the Grid.
Yeah, about an hour. I played about
that
an hour.
NFT battle royale. Kind of the same idea there, where it was a hero-based shooter, but you could loot it. You could take those abilities from those people.
Yeah, right. I played it a little bit. It just didn't sit with me because I'm not really a big battle royale person, which is kind of interesting because I love extraction shooters. But it never really drew me too much. I played it for a little bit just for kind of like the experience. But I saw its potential. But yeah, I see the comparison.
Guys, I want to push back on both of you for saying that there's a space for a movement shooter in this genre. Do you guys remember in 2018, Ubisoft released a battle royale named Hyperscape?
I do.
That game was just like, so I thought that and I think most of us agree, the cool thing about battle royale is like, oh, you're dropped into this giant open world and you can kind of take things at your own pace and you can play it fast if you want, you can play it slow if you want, you can kind of play it as you want, right? Hyperscape came out and it said like, what if Unreal Tournament, what if Quake, but in like this very uninteresting battle royale format. Whereas I feel like every PvP engagement in that game was just two players jumping high into the air, quick scoping each other, right? And I just felt like, when I played that game, I'm like, oh, this game's not for me. Like I'm no longer interested in Unreal Tournaments. I'm no longer interested in Quakes. So I bounced off that game real quickly. I think that this genre is like you have to pull. It's almost like having a restaurant where like all we do is spaghetti here. It's like, no, you have to have spaghetti, you have to have hamburgers, you have to have chicken fingers, you have to have chicken salads. You have to have.
But look at In-N-Out. They got 2 burgers, brother.
All right, that's true.
I'm going to push against that because
I agree.
I think in 2018, 2019 was a different gaming landscape than today. In 2018 and 2019, we were full force in love with the AAA. We were on the Call of Duty. We were on the Battlefield. We were on the Assassin's Creed. If a little tiny game came out, it couldn't compete with Call of Duty. It couldn't be on the same level of these Battlefields and these World of Warcrafts. But I feel post-COVID, the AAA space is fucking terrible. And you have your normal, regular people that are on PlayStation that, are playing the Call of Duty. What was that release that 42% of PlayStation owners during 2023 had only played Call of Duty on their PlayStation?
No, really?
I think that nowadays you can get these people into the indie dev genre. I think that's why Hyperscape failed. I think the name and the branding behind it and the marketing behind it wasn't strong enough to overthrow a Call of Duty or a PUBG or an H1Z1. But I think we're in the opposite space today.
I think I'm a little bit on the opposite end of this one. I think it's more simple than that. I think battle royales as a genre because we've seen this in other genres as well. We saw this cycle occur in MMORPGs. We saw it in MOBAs. We saw it in battle royales. It's basically like when someone really finally gets in there and starts making real headway in terms of making money, it really starts to get everybody else's attention. So they start jumping in. That's the chaos factor. That's every game is viable until it's not phase. And then then once that finishes though, it stabilizes. But once it stabilizes, you got your 1, your 2, your 3 maybe big ones. Everything else is just going to be chewed up and spit out, right? And I think at that point, Ubisoft was just too late. It could have been the best game in the world. They were just too late at that point. And
Yeah,
I think
there were
we're
a
still
lot
in
of
that phase. I think
there were a lot of successful battle royales after Hyperscape, though.
I mean, look at Warzone.
Naraka Blade Point came out. That was a big success.
Right. And so like when you come into the phase, when you come into that particular phase of a genre like building, right, you either A, have to have a buttload of money, or B, you have to be so low in terms of requiring or success requirement in terms of like your studio is small, the game scope is small, you don't need a lot of players to be successful. You have to have one of those two things. Activision, clearly, they're a small studio. No one really knows them. Kidding.
Yeah.
All right. So that was basically those things, right? And so when it comes to the extraction genre, I still think we're still in the chaos phase. We're still in the
100%.
You can still get in and try to make something of it. And I think the big one is that people. I think there was a lot of games that came out. I called it. I made a video. It's called the Shadow of Tarkov. And then people kept trying to make Tarkov clones, right? Because they thought that was the only way you could make an extraction shooter, right? I think they were kind of leaning in the direction that you were in terms of like there's no such thing as a movement shooter that can exist in an extraction shooter, and that's not true. It's just that they kept doing it in way. Whoever did do that, they did it in ways that were poor. So a couple of great examples. Hawked is a great example. If anyone remembers that game. It just slapped an extraction mechanic onto a BR. That's all it did. Right? And we had plenty of games that just slapped on extraction mechanics and started trying to ride that wave of like, oh, this is extraction shooter, which is why we came to the conclusion, or at least a lot of people on the internet came to the conclusion there's too many extraction shooters because everything was labeled an extraction shooter, but they didn't play these games, so they didn't realize they actually weren't.
Yeah, and look at DMZ. You have the biggest name, the biggest money, the deepest pockets, not an interesting gameplay loop.
Right, and it's
totally
exactly, and I even pointed out is that the biggest thing for them is that they didn't have enough gear fear to really, give players
high stakes.
Not enough high stakes, and because of DMZ, I came to the conclusion that the lowest stakes you could possibly have in an extraction shooter and still retain a little bit of that edge is Hunt Showdown. That is the lowest possible bar you can possibly have. Anything lower than that, you're gonna fail as a game. Period. Full stop. That's my opinion.
And I think Marathon is lower than that.
I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but here's the issue I have with that. I don't think they're lower. They might be the same. They might be higher because the thing about Hunt is that the economy is super shallow, but it's very wide. Is that you can't loot anything, right? So you can't come out with like a bazillion guns and like items, things like that. At the very least, Marathon you can, right? And so that's just kind of like the part of it that I feel like it's the potential is higher than Hunt. But I think the gear fear level, since everything is like so cheap and so effective at that cheap level, it doesn't feel higher than that. It still feels the same, if not lower than that. So it's both and it's neither at the same time for some reason.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I will say, I do have a hard out
go ahead.
soon. I know the hour is closing, but I wanted to address a rumor of an article I saw last night.
Yes,
I'll read the tweet verbatim by Arc News. Steam update for the game lasting 9 minutes yesterday added a new exe file. When open, displays a window with a base 64 strings to a countdown website that has since been removed. The countdown from the Arc Raiders ended June 6, 2025 at 11 p.m., which is the very end of Summer Games Fest. And some are theorizing might be a full launch date, get out there and play right now, live drop, much like, what was that recently? The RuneScape game that just came out. But what would you guys think about a June 6th release date for Arc Raiders? Ready to go? Way too early?
I just don't know if it makes sense to. You're saying like Shadow Drop, right?
Yeah, that is a rumor right now.
First of all, I would love that. I would love that. But here's my question: doesn't it just make more financial sense to be like, hey, 1 month from today, it's like let's build a little bit a countdown hype, right? Like it's going to release 30 days from now. I just feel like that makes more financial sense, knowing absolutely nothing about how video game marketing works.
I mean,
Gecko, what do you think?
I mean, given Embark's history, I don't think that's likely, to be honest. I think because the way they found it, right, in terms of it was in that app, it wasn't just some random thing on the internet or whatever. They found it in the app. it doesn't really point to like a trailer. I've always been saying, okay, cool, Summer Games Fest, at the very minimum, we're going to get a trailer with a date on it.
Yep.
Right. Since they found it in an app like that, I don't think it's a trailer. I think it's an actual playable type of shift in the actual Steam store. So at the bare minimum, you might get like pre-order starts, something like that. And I'm moving the bar very, very low with that minimum. Right. What I think is what's likely to happen is an open beta. That's going to be very short. If not, who knows, right? It's more likely to be open beta, because if you look at Embark's history and how they treated the finals, they're not likely to drop the full release yet.
Yeah, ready to go. Yeah, they like to cook.
I do think a shadow drop is in the future, because that's just how they like to do it. And I think it's a huge benefit. I think people have forgotten how Apex got huge. It's just basically they dropped out of nowhere and they let people play the game for themselves. Yeah.
And in response to that also, how do you feel about the September date for Marathon? Are we seeing that in September, or not a fucking chance in hell?
There's two answers to this. There's one, what I think they should do, and what I think they're actually going to do. I think everyone can predict what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
So what they think they should do, they should absolutely just delay the sucker and like really cook it and really take the feedback in earnest. Aside from the whole art thing, which is garnering a lot of attention, I don't think that's their biggest issue, to be honest. I think the game itself is their biggest issue. And so they need to let it cook. However, given what we know about Bungie's and Sony's situation in terms of the Bungie's leadership and how that buyout is occurring and things like that, I think these people will march that game out to its death on September 23rd.
Because Sony wants money. Don't you think? Isn't there some like rumor of like Sony almost wants this game to fail because then they can absorb like the rest of Bungie?
I don't know, but I know there's their particular news. I think it's like a lot of Bungie leadership gets the full payment for the buyout sometime next year. And so what happens to this game between then and then is really irrelevant to them. They're like, cool, I'm bouncing the hell out. Again, that's me presuming a lot of motivations and things like that. But it's like, well, 1 + 1 is 2, so this is probably what's going to happen.
Right.
Like, do I want that to happen? No, I don't know. I not want that to happen. Yeah. Given everything that I know about the company, what they've been showing with their actions, I think it's exactly what's about to happen.
Yeah. Luve, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
The industry, 99.999% of the industry does not shadow drop games, and they do it because of financial reasons. So why would Embark shadow drop Arc Raiders?
Financial reasons.
A couple reasons. Hype alone in the game industry from shadow dropping has been incredible. This recent build up, I think it would be after a beta. Didn't consider that from Gecko's point. I think an open beta into a shadow drop would be pretty good. But if you recently look at, and I can pull the stats here. I don't know how deep you guys are into RuneScape, but RuneScape used their IP to drop RuneScape Dragon Wilds recently. Some talks, little trailers, and a month later, shadow dropped and sold. I want to get that correct number, so give me a second.
I think if you want the short answer in terms of
they sold 600,000 units the first day at $40 a pop, shadow dropping it. I think it can build hype. I think it can build hype in a sense of, if a game release date, streamers think about it, but if a game would shadow drop, you're gonna have Shroud and all these giant names on there. Tima, Tatman, Ninja, all these big people are going to hop on that day one. I think shadow dropping does make a hop machine.
For free,
yeah, exactly, without paying them.
Right.
Exciting times indeed. Times indeed.
And I think the main reasons, like you said, for financial reasons, like think about it, right? So you have to if you're trying to market something, you're usually, these are campaigns that I'm sure Luve knows significantly more about in terms of this, but like I'm just
millions
from my point of view, it's like, okay, you're spending minimum, you're looking at 3 to 6 months of like planning, contract building, paying the right people. You're looking at getting times for big time streamers, which is probably the most effective way you can market a game these days.
Yep.
And you're looking at all these contracts, a release date, all that stuff. So you have all this hype and build up, right? And then day one, right? Everyone is looking at your game, which means any little issue is going to get magnified to a bazillion, like server issues, hackers, whatever it is that you can think of, it bugs, like all these things are going to magnify to a million.
And also the shadow drops can make up for a lot of that. If you shadow drop a game and the game crashes, you can easily step back. We didn't expect this many players. we didn't expect this to happen. It's much more forgivable when people aren't over anticipating it. Look at Grand Theft Auto in that same sense. I'll let you finish, Gecko. But when that game comes out, they had to postpone it because that game needs to be fucking perfect because of the hype built up behind it. Nothing will be on that same scale. But if you don't have a build up, you can only exceed expectations.
Exactly, and that's one of the main things that I brought up with when it comes to like expectations in my video regarding Arc Raiders versus Marathon. Is a Marathon built up this huge hype machine for like a complete letdown, whereas Arc Raiders dropped out of nowhere effectively for a lot of people and just blew those expectations out of the water, right? And so I think when you have those shadow drop situations, like cool, if you have issues, you can address them with not everyone and their mother looking at you, right? And so you can address them and then let word of mouth, let people play the game and then, you know, sell the game for you. And it's okay, cool. Now you can start building up the hype. Now you can start building up the advertisement in ways that you feel are effective. Because at that point, it's...
And I kind of feel like the opposite happened with Gray Zone Warfare. I feel like they built up so much hype around Gray Zone and they came into a game that was honestly pretty okay, but just wasn't fully fleshed out. And people were like, eh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's just, I think we're going to get an open beta. I don't think we're going to get a release. People have commented the fact that because of where they are in terms of the country, they tend to take the summer off. So it's not likely they're going to drop it right now, which is sad for me. I want to see it really soon. But what I think will happen, I think we're going to get a beta in June. So when people said, oh, it's June 6th, anyone who's paying attention shouldn't be shocked by that. And we're going to see a release potentially, you know, August, September, or something like that. If it were me, if I were running the company, I would say release September 23rd.
Right onto Bungie's face.
Like legitimately, like a fight, like a pre-fight, like stare down and be like, "What you gonna do?"
That would be hilarious because the media would go nuts with that.
Absolutely, because it would build hype on its own, right there.
Yeah.
Well, all I gotta say is, guys, I expect you guys in there with me. We got to get a little 3-peat drop when that open beta does come around.
For sure.
Oh,
for sure.
For sure. All right, guys, we have to wrap it up. This podcast is going over long. Final thoughts. Say something to say goodbye. Gecko, you go first.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. We're gonna do some more. I definitely want to expand this, get more people in here, get different perspectives, really kind of hone in on Arc Raiders as it starts coming out. Definitely also get some initial reactions after we had a chance to play the game. Potentially even stream the podcast itself so that people to chat can get a chance to interact with the topics at hand. Super excited for Arc Raiders. Been literally foaming at the mouth for this game for like 2 years now, so I'm super happy we're finally getting to the point where it's just about to get there. So yeah, thanks guys.
Yes. All right, Lou, finish this. Take us off.
Yeah. Didn't think of much coming in here, but you guys seem like two really cool guys. I love the high level talk about video games, not just A good, B bad. Great insight. Can't wait to sink my teeth more into this game and the genre itself. And I love hearing different sides of each argument because, like, I think diversity is the spice of life. So to hear everyone's experiences, I'm looking forward to hearing that moving forward.
That's right. And I'll just say I had fun, and we'll see everyone later.
Thanks, guys.